debut into the French court as a dancer. Very talented in many different ways. And this sonata is for flute piano, and it's in B minor, I think.
Remind me to tell you sometime of another little thing I said to Her Majesty. Something about a fierce light beating on...
Matter of your Royal Highness wedding.
Oh, yes.
As your Majesty is aware, the young Prince Simon arrives today to seek her Royal Highness and be married. As he been traveling in distant lands and, as I understand, has not is unfortunate, Your Majesty, but there is one just understands how it has appeared.
You don't think she takes after me at all? You don't detect a likeness?
Most certainly not, Your Majesty.
Good, good. Your predecessor did.
I have often wondered what happened to my person.
Well, now you know.
There was a short silence.
Looking at the bright
There's a distinction.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Look at it from the suitor's point of view. If a girl is beautiful, it is easy to assume that she has tucked away inside her an equally beautiful character. But is it possible to assume that an unattractive girl, however elevated in character, has tucked away inside her an equally beautiful face? That is kingdom.
She is indeed, Majesty, with the exception that these are the same, Your Majesty and Her Majesty.
Your exceptions are tolerated for their loyalty and condemned for their extreme fatuity.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
As an adjective for your king, the word nice is ill chosen. As an adjective for her majesty, it is ill chosen.
At which moment the queen comes in. The king rises, the chancellor puts himself at right angles.
Ah, talking about Camilla?
Really, I understand.
In 25 years, he must have been seen by somebody.
Just a fleeting glimpse.
I made, Your Majesty, that no detailed report of him has reached this country. That when he received that he had
Something else. Do you remember what happened when you had the
And I'd like to introduce you to a summer school communication class. We have a few absentees today, but those who are here, I know, were further encouraged by knowing that you'd be here too. We have been giving speeches this summer, learning how to be effective communicators. And the students have so far delivered demonstration speeches and informative speeches. They were encouraged to select musical topics for their informative speeches. And several of them chose modern music that was appealing to them. We heard speeches on Joy Division, U2, Slash, the Beatles, a speech about bass guitars, a really interesting speech in my other class about warming up the voice prior to singing, using that instrument. We had a great speech about drums and how they work, and also a specific speech about the electric guitar. Morning. I'd like to give credit where it's due. The artwork, I don't know if you recognize the gentleman here. This is done from memory from the photo in the newspaper. The artist is Mr. Matt McCott, right here. And the lettering was done.
Most renowned composers of classical music and opera, who has provided great music to many generations every day for the past 100 years, is none other than Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. I would like to increase your knowledge on this character by giving you a brief and very informative biography of him, related to his life and to many of his achievements. I have also seen the movie Amadeus, which perhaps many of you might be familiar with. Most important, I enjoy his music and I listen to his fantastic tunes. Through my presentation, you will learn a brief history of Mozart, from his youth, some of his famous pieces, and a great deal of information of his life. Even some letters written by Mozart to his father in his outview of life. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the supreme figure among natural geniuses in music, was born at Salzburg in the Bavarian Alps in January 27, 1756. Mozart's career as a musician began at the age of 3, when he discovered the family clavichord, an ancestor of the piano. He began to pick out harmonies, and thus embarking himself in a great career as a composer and a musician. His sister to Munich, Vienna, where he says to have learned the organ and the violin without any instruction. They did a lot of traveling the next couple of years, beginning with Paris, which we learned from Giselle's speech yesterday. Here in Paris, his first compositions began to appear. At the 8th feet of all musical history, This was during Holy Week when they went to hear the Sistine Chapel chorus sing Allegris Miserere, which was forbidden to copy or to circulate. On going home, Mozart wrote the entire work by memory, correcting only a few passages when going to hear it once again. This was heard by the Pope, who sent for Mozart, not to punish him, but to praise his extraordinary genius. It was written along with two others in a period of 6 weeks, between June 26th and August 10th, 1778. He wrote this under incredible circumstances. He was under spiritual and physical stress, because during that time his wife was very ill and they had no money. With creditors harassing him, Mozart, driven by this desperation, summoned every ounce of energy, both physical and mental, memorable and grand. Another great work of his was the overture to the Magic Flute, composed for opera, was Mozart's last great work, in which he was particularly proud. It is based in part on a mythology derived from Egypt. The music, and particularly the overture, is lovely as any that Mozart left. And lastly, the overture to the Marriage of Figaro. Nocete de Figaro. It's a comic opera. It is based on a comedy by Beau Marquise and was first produced in Vienna in 1786. The overture is full of grace and delicacy that always mark the music of Mozart. Just talked about the birth of a great genius and his beginning, and some of his great works. Let's see Mozart himself. Mozart, although all through his life, was like a child, careless and innocent, with a great imagination and a gift that he used to give the world great music. Memorized music with sometimes 183 passages. He was a great sight reader and liked to show off his talent, but he was a heavy drinker, and almost all through his life he was very ill. Late in life, he gave lessons to Ludwig van Beethoven. In his adulthood, he married a girl named Constance in 1782 and had children. Here are two letters Mozart wrote to his father. Notice some characteristics of Mozart portrayed by his letters. Rain. In an unmarked grave. His widow, seeking the spot a few days later, could not find it, for the keeper himself had not made a note of it. 68 years later, they made a monument of Mozart in Vienna. In the end, Mozart had given the world 636 works of music. Pure genius, from quartets to symphonies. I've talked all through my presentation about the birth of a great musician. Some of his great works like Jupiter, Figaro, and the Magic Flute, and his tragic end, given by his poor health and heavy drinking. I hope you tune into some of his fine music and appreciate the work of Mozart as I do. 94.1, the classic.
I recommend that too.
I'm told by Mrs. Bingham that if you have any questions for either of my friends, that I'm sure they would be happy to answer. Have you any? I have one. How do you determine your programming?
We put all the names in a hat, throw them up, and weigh them down. But we have a basic core of composers that we structure the day on. For instance, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann. And we make sure those composers are represented. Then we go delving into the less well-known. Always seeking music that is what we term accessible classics rather than the junky classical music that is written. We don't feature too much that's been modern written lately because there's not very much good being written by these so-called classical musicians of late. All through history, Bach, Handel, Telemann, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky. When they were composing, they will almost immediately love the works by the people who heard them. Nowadays, composers are sitting in universities not having to please the people in order to live, and so they're writing for themselves. And this has managed to make them alienate themselves or compose on a different plane than music, which moves people. Music must be a twofold thing. It must appeal to the intellect and the emotion, and in varying degrees. So that's why we don't play too much modern music, but we do play a lot of the late Romantic and classical Baroque. Between the two, and sometimes getting back just in time to take a deep breath and say what it was. But we don't just sit around looking spitballs at the ceiling.
In your career, did being a broadcaster come first, or being a musician, or someone interested in music?
Should I tell them the story?
Tell them the story.
Okay. Let's go from when I was so high. Okay, we've got time?
Sure.
When I first left school, I was interested in technical work, so I began life, working life, as a factory electrician, looking after electric motors, electric switchgear, metal detectors, the electronics on wrapping machines, and so forth. And I loved that. But I also loved music. I'd been given violin lessons and piano lessons through school, and I was still pursuing that. I played a church organ. And I'd been part of a barbershop quartet, so I decided to take some voice lessons. And my voice teacher encouraged me to sing in a scholarship contest, which I won. Then I went to London to study, from New Zealand to London. Went through college, worked around Britain for a while, married an American, not this one. And she hated London, so we went to Springfield, Illinois, which I hated. Then I did some auditions and got a job with Houston Grand Opera. Sang there for a while and made radio commercials for British Caledonian Airways when it was in existence. And they played on the classical station in Houston. And one of the announcers there was also a singer. We just happened to share a dressing room, and he said to me one day, you know, we love your commercials, you should be on the radio. So just half jokingly I said, okay, so give me a job. And here I am. So music came before broadcasting. Did you have a question? No.
Well, I'd like to ask Mrs. McClaren a question. That you are the producer of the program, is that
Right.
She's the brain.
And what was your path to this position?
Well, it's also a rather long story. I went into college at the advice of my chorus teacher in high school, who suggested that I major in music and voice particularly. And so I went in to major in voice, but I wanted to be a jazz singer, not what I ended up doing. And I kept arguing with my voice teacher back and forth when I'd go to lessons. She'd say, no, you've got to sing serious music, you have to sing serious music.
She still argues.
And she wouldn't let me sing the jazz and stuff that I wanted to sing. Anyhow, a couple of songs and things that she introduced me to, I went to the library to listen to them, to learn them. And I fell in love with this one particular singer, Leontine Price, and this recording. And after that, I was hooked on opera. So I started learning everything I possibly could about opera. The stories fascinated me. I started going to the opera. Before I went, I would always learn the story beforehand. I translated scores. I'd sit there, and I really fell in love with it. So for the last 6 to 8 years, I've been traveling around as a professional opera singer. This past fall, well, actually about a year and a half ago, they had a need for a music director, and Kingsley kind of needed some help with some of the things that he was doing. We got together, we met because he broadcast the opera for the radio. So we would go to the opera, and then he broadcast it there live, and then play the tape a week or so later. And he knew that I loved opera, so he just invited me, just, you know, half kiddingly, and so we went, and the rest was history. But so I ended up as the music director there because they needed some help. I started doing that and said I'd do it if I still could travel around and do the singing that I was doing. But as it turned out, I really didn't like the traveling as much because I was away from my family, and that really was That was really the pits, and I didn't like living in it. It's not as glamorous as it looks. I mean, it looks great when you're up there on stage and there's audience, you know, people out there clapping. But when you're away from home at the holidays and you're not there, and it's really lonely, and some of the people that you work with are hard to work with. And so Paula Bingham approached us about doing a program, and so I had also worked with San Diego Opera as one of the singers in their education outreach for 2 years, where we traveled around schools and sang in schools and stuff. And so I put together the program based on some of the experience that I'd had. Plus, I'd been a teacher for 3 years in the middle of all of that, so that's how that came about.
It's a wonderful program, and I think that the kids at our school have really benefited. The opera has a nice outreach program. I sponsor the Fine Arts Club, and we've had, for the past 3 years or so, we've had students in attendance at all of the student audience operas, and several of them have really gotten hooked and involved in it through that opportunity, that low-price opportunity.
Well, I have more of a broad interest of music. I like all kinds of music. He particularly only likes classical music. But I didn't grow up listening to classical music at all. In fact, it wasn't until I went into college that I ended up liking it and ended up getting into it. But one of the things I discovered was that there's bad music in every category of music. And there's good music in a lot of categories of music. And so my viewpoint is to find the good in the kinds of music. You know, there are some things that I like of pop music today, and then there are some other things that I can't stand. So.
You play different types of music at different times of the day. 4 o'clock you get a little light, don't you?
That's what we call drive time, and drive time in the morning is similar to drive time in the afternoon. We have a lot of those things we call commercials to play on radio. They help pay for us to work there. So we have to fit them in. Also, people are getting in and out of their cars in their journey home, so at any given time I like them to at least have one piece that's complete. So we tend to play all the 5 to 12-minute pieces. They're now in pop radio, anything that's over 5 minutes they call a bathroom piece, because that actually gives them a chance to go to the bathroom. For me, it's a short piece. But we do tend to shorten the pieces during drive time and lighten them up, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to sit behind anyone who's conducting Mahler while they're driving along the freeway. And I certainly don't want them behind me either. So we keep it light, so that, because the concentration level is on the road, and it's just light entertainment during drive time. The heavier music is during the other part of the day, from 10 till 3.
My granddaughter has gotten where we get in the car now. She asks, I drive her home every day, and she asked me to put your station on around 4 o'clock.
You've got a nice granddaughter.
She's only 2 years old.
She's going to be a well-behaved child.
Well, I think the class will join me in thanking you for devising the program, supporting it, and for coming here and talking with us today.
It all happened because Mrs. Bingham sent a simple letter saying, please play a piece each morning and say hello to Bonita Vista High School summer students. And of course, then the brains in the family get behind it, and this is what happens.
It's been, I think, a really incredible program. Again, you know, I had no idea that it was going to be this expansive and all-inclusive. And it's because of Mr. and Ms. McLaren here. We appreciate it very much.
We thank all of you.